I first met Clara on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The gray clouds hung low in the sky, mirroring my mood as I trudged up the steps of the old Victorian building I managed. I had been called to apartment 4B due to numerous complaints from other tenants about noise, foul odors, and a general sense of unease that seemed to emanate from that particular unit. As the landlord, it was my responsibility to address these issues, even if it meant confronting a difficult tenant. The moment Clara opened the door, I was taken aback. She was not what I had expected. Her appearance was disheveled, with wild, unkempt hair and eyes that seemed to burn with an intensity I had never encountered before. The smell of stale alcohol wafted from the apartment, mingling with the scent of cigarette smoke and decay. She glared at me, her expression a mix of suspicion and defiance. "What do you want?" she spat, her voice rough and edged with anger. "I'm John, the landlord," I replied, trying to keep my tone calm and professional. "I've received several complaints about noise and other issues coming from your apartment. I need to address them." Clara's eyes narrowed, and she took a step back, allowing me a glimpse into the chaos that was her living space. Piles of garbage, old newspapers, and discarded clothing littered the floor. The walls were covered in graffiti, some of it crude and offensive. It was clear that she was a hoarder, and the state of the apartment was a testament to her troubled mind. "Get lost," she snarled, attempting to slam the door in my face. But I was quicker, wedging my foot in the gap before she could shut me out completely. "Clara, we need to talk about this," I insisted, my voice firm. "Your neighbors are concerned, and frankly, I am too. This isn't a healthy way to live." For a moment I thought she might lash out physically. Her fists clenched, and she seemed to be on the verge of attacking me. But then something in her eyes shifted. The anger faded, replaced by a flicker of vulnerability. She stepped back, allowing me to enter. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of conflict and reluctant cooperation. Clara was a deeply troubled woman, prone to violent outbursts and erratic behavior. She swore constantly, making baseless accusations against everyone she encountered. She accused me of trying to evict her illegally, of spying on her, of conspiring with her enemies. It was exhausting, but beneath her abrasive exterior, I sensed a profound loneliness and pain. Despite her hostility, I found myself drawn to her. There was something about her fiery spirit that captivated me. I began to visit her more frequently, not just to address the complaints, but to try and help her. I brought groceries, helped clean her apartment, and listened to her rants and raves. Slowly, she began to open up to me, revealing glimpses of the woman she had once been before life had taken its toll. Clara had been through hell. She had a drug addict ex-boyfriend who constantly harassed her, a probation officer who was always on her case, and a social service worker who seemed more interested in accusing her of missed meetings than in offering real support. Her sponsor hadn't heard from her in months, and it was clear that Clara was spiraling deeper into despair. I knew I was getting in too deep, but I couldn't stop myself. I was falling in love with her. Every moment I spent with Clara only intensified my feelings. I saw past the chaos and the anger to the woman beneath. She was smart, resourceful, and fiercely independent. She had a wicked sense of humor and a smile that could light up the darkest room, though she rarely used it. One evening, after a particularly brutal argument with her ex-boyfriend, Clara showed up at my door, drenched from the rain and trembling with rage. She had a wild look in her eyes, and I knew she was on the edge. "I can't take it anymore," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I just want it all to end." I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly as she sobbed. "You don't have to go through this alone, Clara. I'm here for you. We'll get through this together." From that moment on, I was determined to help her. I confronted her ex-boyfriend, threatening to involve the police if he didn't leave her alone. The first thing was her upcoming court hearing. I stood outside the cold, imposing door of the hearing room, my heart pounding in my chest. Clara had promised me she would be here, but as the minutes ticked by, my hopes began to fade. I knew where she was. I had seen the telltale signs, the vacant stare, the jittery hands, the desperate need for escape. She was in the bathroom, lost to the heroin that had ensnared her once again. But I couldn't wait. The court adjudicators was ready to convene, and I had to speak for her, to fight for her freedom. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and pushed open the door. The room was stark and formal, the air thick with judgment. 3 members of the court sat behind a long table, their expressions unreadable. A few other officials and onlookers were scattered about, their eyes turning to me as I entered. I cleared my throat and approached the podium, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "My name is John Lawson, and I'm here on behalf of Clara." One of the board members, a stern-looking woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Mr. Lawson, where is Miss Clara? This is her court hearing." I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to glance towards the bathroom door. She's unable to attend at the moment, but I beg you to hear me out. Clara deserves another chance." There was a murmur of disapproval, but I pressed on, knowing I had to make them see the Clara I knew, the Clara I loved. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know that Clara has made mistakes. She has struggled with addiction and has had run-ins with the law. But I ask you to look beyond her past and see the person she truly is, the person she can become with the right support and understanding. I ask you grant Clara time served." There was an audible gasp in the courtroom. The adjudicators remained stoic. Their ice glare soon shut everyone up. I paused, taking a deep breath. In the Gospel of John it is written, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." We all have our flaws, our moments of weakness, but it is through grace and compassion that we find redemption. Clara needs that grace now more than ever. The silver-haired woman raised an eyebrow, but I could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. And let us not forget the Magna Carta, the cornerstone of our legal system, which enshrines the rights and freedoms of every individual. My courtroom summation ran for 3 hours straight. I glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of each board member. Clara is not a lost cause. She has shown moments of incredible strength and resilience. She has the capacity to change, to become a productive member of society. But she needs your help. She needs another chance to prove herself. My voice wavered slightly, but I continued. I love Clara, I believe in her, and I know that with the right support, she can overcome her demons. I ask you grant Clara time served. Give her the opportunity to turn her life around. Show her that there is hope, that there is a future beyond the shadows of her past. There was a heavy silence in the room as I finished speaking, the weight of my words hanging in the air. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions thoughtful. Finally, the silver-haired woman nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson," she said quietly. "We will take your words into consideration." I stepped back from the podium, my heart still pounding, and left the room, my thoughts turning to Clara. She hadn't been there to hear my plea, lost in her addiction once more. But I would keep fighting for her, keep believing in her, no matter what, because that's what love is, unwavering, unyielding, and eternal. Next on the list, Clara's counselor social worker. I sat in the cramped, dimly lit office of Clara's social worker, Mrs. Evelyn Trent. The walls were lined with old files and dusty books, the air thick with the scent of musty paper and stale coffee. Mrs. Trent sat across from me, her face pale and her eyes wide with a mix of fear and frustration. She had called me in for an urgent meeting, and I could tell from her demeanor that it was about Clara. "Mr. Lawson," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to talk to you about Clara. I'm extremely concerned about your involvement with her." I leaned forward, trying to keep my tone calm and reassuring. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Trent, but I love Clara. I believe in her, and I'm committed to helping her through this." She shook her head, her expression one of disbelief. "You don't understand what you're getting yourself into. Clara, she's done things, horrible things. Her past is filled with trauma and violence. Let me tell you some of the things she's been involved in." I braced myself as she took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clutched a file in front of her. "Clara has a history of violent outbursts," Mrs. Trent began. "She once attacked a man in a bar with a broken bottle, nearly blinding him in one eye. She's been arrested multiple times for assault and battery, each incident more brutal than the last." I felt a knot form in my stomach, but I didn't interrupt. I needed to hear this, to understand the depths of Clara's pain. "She's also a chronic thief, Mrs." Her voice growing more intense. "She's been caught stealing from her neighbors, from stores, even from friends. Jewelry, money, anything she could get her hands on. and when she's caught, she lashes out, turning violent. She's struggled with severe substance abuse for years, she said, her voice quieter now, almost sorrowful. Heroin, meth, alcohol. She's been in and out of rehab more times than I can count. Each time she relapses, it's worse. She's overdosed multiple times, nearly dying on several occasions. Mrs. Trent's eyes filled with tears as she continued. Clara's been involved in dangerous criminal activities. She's associated with drug dealers, gang members. She's been a part of violent confrontations, some of which resulted in fatalities. There's a darkness in her, a desperation that drives her to the edge. She paused, taking a shaky breath. And then there are the psychological issues. Clara has been diagnosed with severe PTSD, borderline personality disorder, and sociopathy. She manipulates, lies, and deceives to get what she wants. She's accused innocent people of horrendous acts, causing them immense harm and suffering. Mrs. Trent looked at me, her eyes pleading. Mr. Lawson, Clara is dangerous. She's unpredictable and volatile. She's hurt so many people, left a trail of destruction in her wake. You're putting yourself in immense danger by involving yourself with her. The litany of horrors was overwhelming, a stark reminder of the turbulent and chaotic world Clara inhabited. But despite everything, I couldn't shake the love I felt for her, the belief that she could change. Mrs. Trent, I said softly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me, I appreciate your concern. I really do. But Clara is not just the sum of her past mistakes. She's a person, a deeply wounded person, who needs help and love. I believe that with the right support, she can overcome her demons. She shook her head again, more vigorously this time. Clara is beyond saving. She'll drag you down with her, destroy your life, just as she's destroyed her own. I stood up, meeting her gaze with a determination that surprised even me. Maybe she will. Maybe I'm making the biggest mistake of my life. But I have to try. I love her, and I believe in her, and I'm not giving up on her. Mrs. Trent's shoulders slumped, defeat and sadness etched into her features. I hope, for your sake, that you're right, but please be careful. Clara is a storm, and I fear you're stepping into the eye of it. I nodded, understanding the gravity of her warning, but resolute in my decision. Clara was my storm, and I was willing to weather it, no matter the cost. A few days later, I received an urgent text message from my sister. It had only 2 words, family emergency. I could only surmise what it could be about, so I texted back that I would be there to help. My phone, meanwhile, was receiving data usage warnings from my carrier. My other tenants were texting non-stop, demanding I address their issues, and that Clara threatened them again. If only they realized the sincerity of my efforts in trying to remedy the situation. The living room was a battlefield, and as I entered, the anger in the air was almost suffocating. My family and closest friends had gathered for an intervention, their faces twisted with rage and fear. My mother, father, sister, and 2 of my best friends sat in a semicircle, leaving an empty chair for me in the center. The hostility was palpable, making my skin prickle. "John, sit the f*** down!" my father shouted, his face red with fury. The harshness in his voice hit me like a slap. I reluctantly took the seat, my heart pounding. "Okay, I'm here. What's this about?" My mother's eyes were filled with tears, but her expression was cold and hard. "John, you're f***ing ruining your life. That woman is going to drag you straight to hell with her." "Ruining my life?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "I love Clara. She's had a rough life, but she's trying to change." My sister Emily slammed her fist on the table, her face contorted with rage. "Trying to change? Are you f***ing kidding me? She's a goddamn psychopath, John." She attacked a man in a bar with a broken bottle and nearly blinded him. "She's been arrested more times than we can count for assault and theft." "Emily, calm down," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "Calm down," she screamed. "No, John, I won't calm down. She's a heroin addict who's overdosed multiple times. She hangs out with drug dealers and gang members. People have died because of her." My best friend, Mark, stood up, his face livid. "John, she's a manipulative, lying sociopath. She's got severe PTSD, borderline personality disorder, sociopathy. She needs help," I shouted back, feeling the heat rise in my face. "She needs support, not condemnation." Rachel, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward, her voice icy. "You're deluding yourself, John. She's not going to change. She's toxic, and she's dragging you into her chaos. She accused innocent people of horrific things, ruining their lives. She steals, she lies, she destroys everything she touches. My mother's voice broke as she pleaded, "John, please, think about your future. Think about what she's doing to you. You can't save her, but you can save yourself. Leave her before it's too late." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of their words crushing me. I looked around at the faces of the people who loved me, who were desperate to save me from myself. "Don't you see?" I said quietly, my voice shaking. "I love her. I see the good in her. I believe she can change. She just needs someone to believe in her." My father's face twisted with disgust. "You're a fucking fool, John. She's using you. You're nothing more than a meal ticket. A patsy. She'll destroy you and you'll let her." Tears filled my eyes, but I held my ground. "Maybe I'm a fool, but I can't give up on her." "I won't." Emily's voice was sharp and bitter. "Then you're a lost cause. And when she finally ruins you, don't come crying to us. We tried to warn you." Mark's eyes were filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "Wake up before it's too late." "I'm not blind," I said firmly. "I know who she is. I know what she's done. But I also know she's capable of change. She just needs someone to believe in her." Rachel shook her head, her voice cold. "You're signing your own death warrant. She'll chew you up and spit you out. You're nothing to her." I stood up, the room spinning around me. "I appreciate your concern, but I have to do what I think is right. I'm not giving up on Clara." As I walked out of the room, their voices followed me, filled with anger and despair. I knew they were right about Clara's past, about the danger and the chaos, but I couldn't let go of the hope that she could be saved. Even if it meant losing everything, I had to believe in her, because that's what love is, unwavering, unyielding, and eternal. But I didn't care. I loved her. I loved her with a passion that consumed me. Every time I looked into her eyes, I saw the woman she could be, the woman I knew she was deep down. I believed in her, and I was willing to sacrifice everything for her. Later that evening, it was a stormy night, the kind where the wind howls like a banshee, and the rain pelts against the windows with a relentless fury. Inside Clara's apartment, the tension was palpable. Clara had been on edge all evening, her eyes wild and her movements erratic. I could sense something was wrong, but I didn't know how bad it would get. "John, you don't understand," Clara screamed, her voice cracking with desperation and rage. She had been pacing back and forth, clutching a bottle of vodka in one hand and a knife in the other. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair tangled and frizzy from her incessant tugging. "Clara, please put the knife down. Let's talk about this," I pleaded, trying to remain calm despite the fear knotting in my stomach. I took a step toward her, my hands raised in a gesture of peace. She turned on me, her face contorted with fury. "You're just like all the others. You don't care about me. You're just waiting for me to fail." I shook my head, my heart aching at the pain in her voice. "That's not true, Clara. I love you. I'm here for you." "Liar!" she screamed, lunging at me with the knife. I barely had time to react, the blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. I stumbled back, but she was relentless, her eyes burning with madness. "Clara, stop!" I shouted, but she was beyond reason. She struck me across the face with the bottle, the glass shattering and sending shards into my skin. The pain was immediate and blinding, but I forced myself to stay focused. In a desperate move, I grabbed her wrists, trying to disarm her. She fought like a wild animal, biting and scratching, her screams filling the room. I pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her as she thrashed against me. "Clara, I love you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm not letting you go, no matter what." For a moment, she seemed to soften, her struggles lessening. I dared to hope that my words had reached her, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might have come back to me. But then, with a savage scream, she head-butted me, the impact sending stars exploding across my vision. I staggered, my grip loosening, and she took advantage, driving her knee into my stomach. I doubled over, gasping for breath, and she swung the knife again, aiming for my side. Pain erupted as the blade sliced into my flesh, and I fell to the floor, darkness creeping at the edges of my vision. Clara stood over me, panting, the knife still clutched in her hand. She reached down and yanked my wallet from my pocket, and then she was gone, the door slamming behind her. When I came to, the room was silent, the only sound the steady drip of rain from the broken window. I struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain in my side. Blood stained my shirt, and my head throbbed where she had struck me. But despite everything, I found myself smiling. Clara had taken my wallet, but it wasn't the theft that made me smile. It was the thought of her wild, untamed spirit, the passion and fire that had drawn me to her in the first place. She was dangerous, unpredictable, but she was also the woman I loved. I slowly got to my feet, my movements sluggish and pained. I knew I should be angry, terrified even, but all I could think about was finding Clara, holding her in my arms, and telling her that no matter what, I would always come back to her. Because love, true love, isn't about safety or comfort. It's about facing the storms together, even when they threaten to tear you apart. Despite the warnings and the doubts, I proposed to Clara. It was a simple, heartfelt moment, just the two of us in her apartment, surrounded by the remnants of her chaotic life. She said yes, and for the first time, I saw a future filled with possibility. We got married in a small ceremony. None of my relatives showed up, and I didn't know any of the people Clara invited, except they all had gang tattoos or showed extreme signs of drug abuse. I signed over my bank account, power of attorney, and gave Clara the master key to all the other tenants' units in the apartment complex. A gesture of my unwavering trust and commitment. I knew what I felt, and I was willing to risk everything for the woman I loved. Life with Clara was never easy, but it was always worth it. We faced countless challenges, but we faced them together. Our love was a fierce, burning flame, sometimes threatening to consume us, but always illuminating our path. Clara taught me the true meaning of unconditional love, and in return, I gave her the stability and support she had always craved. Clara, and now her ex-boyfriend who has come back into her life, and one morning I found him unpacking his stuff in my living room. Clara and I had found each other in the darkest of times, and now, the three of us, we have all created a light that could never be extinguished. Our love was messy, complicated, and imperfect, but it was ours, and it was real. In the end, it didn't matter what others thought, and that for me was enough.